Hey everyone, welcome. Let's just dive right into it. Sometimes historical events aren't just ink on a page. They literally redraw the map of the world, flip economies upside down, and completely change our future. Today we're looking at an epic, absolute game changer of a historical turning point. It's a voyage that started with a totally mundane, ordinary need, but ended up pushing the world into an era nobody could have ever predicted.
Have you ever actually stopped to think that a simple craving for flavor, like literally what's on your dinner plate, could permanently rewrite global geopolitics? It sounds crazy, right? But it's true. We're about to go on a seriously dramatic ride that kicks off with a very ordinary problem, but ends up turning the global order completely upside down.
Section 1. A desperate quest for spices. Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, we need to travel back in time to the harsh, visceral reality of 15th century Europe and understand their absolute desperation. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture 15th century Europe. Freezing nights, biting cold, and sitting on your dinner table is bland, boiled, and often, literally rotting meat. Obviously, they didn't have refrigerators back then. To make this salt-cured, decaying meat even remotely edible, they desperately needed a magic herb. And that magic was spices: pepper, cloves, cinnamon. But here's the catch. These magical spices didn't grow anywhere in freezing Europe. They came from a faraway, almost mythical land known as India. For Europeans, reaching India was the ultimate dream. But getting there? Yeah, it was practically impossible. They faced massive roadblocks. Arab merchants had a total monopoly on the trade, selling spices literally for their weight in gold. On top of that, the formidable Ottoman Empire had completely blocked off the land routes. So for the highly frustrated kings of Portugal and Spain, there was only one option left: the sea. But guys, in that era, navigating the ocean basically meant death. People were absolutely terrified of falling off a flat earth or getting swallowed by sea monsters. Still, that fanatical craving for flavor pushed them into a relentless obsession to find a sea route, despite the immense fears.
Section 2. Navigating the Death Sea. And this is where our story shifts to a terrifying maritime quest, really highlighting the sheer, raw danger of the ocean in an era way before accurate navigation.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. So, in July 1497, Vasco da Gama departs from Lisbon, and the crowds are literally mourning. They are weeping because they honestly believe da Gama and his crew were sailing straight to their graves. And they weren't entirely wrong. Weeks later, out in the Atlantic Ocean, they were hit by devastating storms. The sources describe massive, towering waves that felt like 10-story buildings crashing down on their wooden ships. They barely survived the storms, but then a silent killer struck. Without fresh food, scurvy ripped through the crew. The descriptions from the source material are incredibly grim. Sailors were suffering from bleeding gums, and their rotting teeth were literally falling out into their own hands. The ships turned into floating graveyards, with agonizing deaths happening every single day. Faced with this absolute nightmare, the surviving crew naturally mutinied. They begged to go home. But Vasco da Gama, his ruthless, fanatic determination was honestly terrifying. Right in the middle of this mutiny, he actually grabbed the navigation tools and tossed them completely overboard. He basically told his men, "Now we have no way back. Either we reach India or this sea will be our mass grave. If anyone speaks of returning, I will kill them myself." Eventually, they conquered the fearsome Cape of Good Hope and reached Malindi on the East African coast. And here, history takes a massive, crucial turn. The Portuguese were basically flying blind. But then, they met an Indian navigator. Think about the incredible irony there. It was an Indian sailor's living mastery of the stars and the monsoon winds that finally guided these battered, lost European ships exactly to their destination.
Section 3. The Golden Shores of Calicut. And finally, the moment arrives, dramatically shifting our narrative from the stench of death to an awe-inspiring, magnificent opulence.
May 20, 1498. After months of living with the smell of death and rotting wood, the air suddenly changes. The fog clears, and a breeze carries the divine, intoxicating scent of sandalwood, cardamom, and black pepper. As they look out, they see towering coconut trees, hear echoing temple bells, and realize they're staring at the incredibly wealthy, bustling port of Calicut.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most comical cultural clashes in history. Picture this: King Zamorin of Calicut, sitting on a golden throne, draped in thick gold chains and priceless diamonds. And standing right in front of him is Vasco da Gama, ragged, unwashed for weeks. When da Gama presented his gifts, cheap wood, brass vessels, some wool hats, and honey, It was a stark, unimaginable contrast. Despite the unimpressive gifts, the king, staying true to traditions of hospitality, welcomed the ragged explorer.
Section 4. Opening the Imperial Pandora's Box. However, as the sources detail, that hospitality came with a heavy, heavy price. The narrative now shifts to the much darker geopolitical consequences of this discovery.
So, the crucial point is what happened when Da Gama finally returned to Lisbon. After paying for the entire voyage, covering the lost ships, and the tragic loss of life, he still made 64 times pure profit. 64 times! To put that into perspective, that number was so astronomically huge it sparked an unstoppable wildfire of greed across all of Europe. Almost overnight, a rapid succession of European powers descended on India. Step 1. The Portuguese return and quickly turn their trading posts into heavily armed fortresses. Step 2. The Dutch arrive, demanding their share. Step 3. French navies enter the battle for dominance. And finally, Step 4. The British East India Company steps in and takes ultimate control. This peaceful hub of global trade was completely transformed into a violent theater of cannons and diplomacy games.
The hospitality shown by King Zamarin was ultimately repaid with imperialism. The sources highlight this starkly. Trade morphed into the naked dance of loot. The golden bird was put in chains. This exploitation broke the back of what was then the world's richest nation. And this desperate search for flavor ended up cementing centuries of brutal colonial subjugation.
Section 5. The Immortal Spirit of India. But that brings us to an uplifting conclusion. Let's focus on the resilience, survival, and the enduring nature of this civilization.
Did Vasco da Gama actually discover India? Well, as the source text beautifully points out, India is not just a piece of land to be discovered. It is an idea, an invincible and immortal soul. Despite centuries of dark subjugation, the fundamental spirit of this ancient nation simply could not be crushed.
Da Gama might have found a sea route in 1498, but the world saw the true strength of India on August 15, 1947. That was the historic moment the chains of foreign slavery were finally broken. When the Golden Bird took flight once more from the ramparts of the Red Fort, it proved that true India cannot be discovered or owned by anyone. Which leaves us with this final thought. A journey that started with the aroma of spices ended up throwing the world into the fires of imperialism. But it also teaches us a massive lesson about resilience. You can cage a golden bird for a time, but can you ever truly stop its flight? Think about that for a second. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer today. We'll catch you next time.